Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been criticised for releasing videos on social media advertising the government's response to the bushfire crisis. Yesterday, Mr Morrison announced a raft of assistance measures, including the deployment of 3,000 Australian Defence Force reservists and Air Force and Navy craft to aid with rescue efforts. Hours after the announcement, Mr Morrison's office released a social media video set to electronic music outlining the arrangements.
In a moment, we'll be joined by the new host of the ABC's Insiders program, David Speers, for his analysis. But first, let's listen to that ad. There's that ad there from the government. For more on this, we're joined now from Melbourne by David Speers, the new host of the ABC's Insiders program. David, good morning to you.
Very good morning, Joe and Josh. Good to be with you.
We've had just news in that the New South Wales Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons has given an interview this morning saying that he wasn't notified by the Prime Minister about the ADF personnel announcement and only found out through media reporting. What kind of problems is this causing for the government?
Well, I think it demonstrates a wider problem here about a lack of communication. We don't know whether the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, had been informed rather than Shane Fitzsimmons, but based on what the Fire Commissioner himself has said there, it's obviously a level of frustration that he's not being kept in the loop. And that really goes to what the Prime Minister was trying to announce yesterday, going to obviously some tension in the states, not requesting quickly or adequately enough defence support. So the Commonwealth then shifting the defence posture, as the Prime Minister articulated yesterday, to essentially a more forward-leaning posture, deploying assets, yes, in liaison and conjunction with the states, but with a more proactive rather than reactive approach from defence. And this gets to the ad that we saw pumped out within hours of the announcement and circulated on social media by the Liberal Party. It just goes to, once again, fairly clumsy politics here. The timing of trying to seek any sort of political capital out of this, which, undoubtedly this is what the ad was trying to do, is just a terrible look, has gone down appallingly. And we saw a bit of cleaning up late last night from the Prime Minister as well, insisting that he'd only put his name to the authorisation for the Liberal Party on this because he's required to do so under law for any social media video post. That's true, but the ad, as you just saw, is pretty clearly an ad. It's not just disseminating information. There's the inspiring music to show confidence that the man has a plan. There's the list of what the government's doing. There's very positive images of Scott Morrison in the field and the firefighters getting all the support they need from defence assets and water bombing aircraft and so on. None of the negative imagery, of course, of some frustrated and angry locals refusing to shake his hand and so on. I just think this once again is an example of, a bit of tone-deaf politics in handling this bushfire crisis.
That posture change, David, comes after weeks of criticism of the Prime Minister over his handling of this bushfire crisis, starting, of course, with his holiday in Hawaii. Just tell us a bit more about the details of this announcement yesterday.
Look, the announcement itself and the defence assets that were deployed are worthy entirely. The call-out of defence reserves, the deployment of HMAS Adelaide on top of the current naval assets, more water bombers to be leased, an extra 4 water bombers. Now, look, you can argue this should have come much earlier, but the content of what was announced has been welcomed by the states. It's been welcomed by some of the federal MPs representing these bushfire-affected electorates as well. So there's no argument now about what's flowing, that this is the right response from the Commonwealth. I still think there's a little uncertainty around how you avoid the problem the Prime Minister himself identified only a few days ago, when he said you don't want state and federal governments stepping over each other. Well, is this going to increase that problem or avoid that problem? We will see. But as I say, the problem then came with the advertisement to try and capitalise on all of this. In fact, just on that too, we can show you the Facebook post on Scott Morrison's Facebook page initially appeared to even have a little donate button there. Donate not to the bushfire relief efforts, but to the Liberal Party. That was promptly taken down, removed from the website itself. That perhaps considered even just a little too crass to be not just seeking political capital, but cold hard cash as well.
Just briefly, David, before we go, do you think then, have you got a sense whether this announcement and how it's played out has improved the feelings around how the Prime Minister has handled this bushfire crisis?
As I say, I think what was announced yesterday has been welcomed. I think that was an entirely understandable and appropriate response from the government. You can get into arguments about when and whether there should have been earlier action on all of this. But look, the Prime Minister is facing a grave question over his political judgement at the start of this year for the way he's handled himself during this bushfire crisis. Speaking to some of those within coalition ranks, government MPs are not panicked. They're not hostile towards the Prime Minister. They're aware this has not been his finest moment, though, and they put that largely down to the Hawaii holiday, the fact that he began this whole thing really well behind the start line, and that's why he's attracted so much blame. Many see the pile on social media as over the top. They expect it will wash through, but they know this is hurting the government right now. I haven't detected, though, any clamour for a radical shift on things like climate change within the government just yet. Look, we'll see in the wash-up of all of this how the politics lie, but it's fair to say, it's an understatement, this has not been the Prime Minister's finest moment.
Has this also increased tensions between the federal government and the state government? Because for weeks the Prime Minister has been saying this bushfire crisis is a state responsibility, and this has marked a real shift. Is there a growing tension between the state and federal government?
Look, I think it's hard to deny there's tension there. We saw yesterday reports in News Corp papers that there was frustration in the Prime Minister's office that the New South Wales government hadn't accepted defence support. That hasn't been denied. And now Shane Fitzsimmons, the Rural Fire Service Commissioner, expressing obviously some concern that he wasn't kept in the loop about the additional defence assets being deployed. So, yes, it very much appears as though there is tension. I would say, ironically, with the Victorian Labor government, which is also battling these bushfire conditions, there's been perhaps even a more cooperative engagement between Daniel Andrews and Scott Morrison, who do get on very well. But yes, when you see tensions between governments at moments like this, that is not going to be inspiring the communities who are looking to all governments of all political persuasions to simply do all they can to help them.